Okay, thank you, Tobias. Hello, everyone. So yes, I'm Zied, working at ECMWF, so the European Center. So I work here in Reading, in Chinfield Park, which is 10 minutes. I mean, if you side from here, it's 10 minutes uphill. So we are a multi-site organization now. We have colleagues in Bonn. We have our supercomputer in Bologna. And yeah, I would like to thank the organizer, Johan in particular, for giving me the opportunity to speak here today. And yes, and I have also to apologize because I have only one equation in my slides. And I hope it's not a faux pas for a workshop with mathematicians. So, okay, but I would like to talk about this idea of crossing point forecast, which is a kind of new concept. And it's related to the field of probabilistic forecasting. So it's very much linked to what the two talks we have heard this morning. And so the idea of the crossing point forecast is that we would like to condense complex information into a number, if you like, and in order to help communicate the forecast and its uncertainty and make, in a sense, a forecast actionable, so that at the end of the day that we can use this forecast to make decisions. So if you want to define a crossing point forecast, we will need two ingredients. So a forecast in the form of a CDF, but also a climatology. And what we will do, we will focus on the intersection point between these two CDFs. More precisely, we look at the projection on the y-axis, on the quantile-level axis, and we will call this measure, which is the number between 0 and 1, we will call it crossing point. Okay, so by doing this, we summarize two CDFs into one number, and we need really these two ingredients. We need an unconditional distribution and a conditional distribution based on the information we have at the starting time of the forecast. When we produce a forecast, we have some information that we don't have when we look at the cloud. When we look at this intersection. So there are other ways to summarize a CDF. We can look at the mean, for example. This is also something that we like to deliver to our users, and some might look at that to take decisions. But here we have this CPF. So why? So I hope so far so good. Please interrupt me if you have questions. It's a workshop, so I'm very happy to answer a question. So why is it interesting to look at this CPF, crossing point forecast? It's not working anymore. People online can still hear me. Sorry for the people online. Okay. No. They can still hear. Okay, that's good. Yes, let's continue. Okay. So okay, there is two parts in my talk. I mean, where we will try to. Okay. I think we try to speak a bit louder. Okay. So there are two applications for the crossing point forecast in my mind. One is in verification, and one is really in producing forecasts and looking at the forecast. Of course, these two applications are very much related one to another. So let's start with the verification of probabilistic forecast. And I think that the CPF nicely fit our system of thinking about verification of probabilistic forecasts. So when we think about verifying probabilistic forecasts, we like to think in terms of scoring rules, proper scoring rules. I mean, these are terms that we have already heard this morning, and in terms also of elicitable functionals. So if you go back to 2011, I mean, if you want to assess the performance of your mean forecast, you will probably use the root mean square error, not another score, and vice versa. I mean, if you want to optimize your loss function, and your loss function is a root mean square error, you will probably pick up the mean of your forecast as an optimal forecast. And There are other examples. For example, for the median, the consistent score in the sense is the mean absolute error, which is a particular case of the quantile forecast. For quantile forecast, we will use the quantile score, right? And to this list, I mean, it is claimed in this paper in 2021 that we can add to this list the crossing point forecast and the diagonal score. So this, if you like, this summary measure, the crossing point forecast has a proper score associated to it. And you might not have heard about the diagonal score. So in a nutshell, a diagonal score is a weighted CRPS. There is two kinds of weighted CRPS. You have a threshold weighted CRPS and quantile weighted CRPS. The diagonal score is at the same time quantile and threshold weighted CRPS with hyphen between the different words. So this at the same time quantile and threshold CRPS, aka diagonal score, is the proper score which is consistent with the crossing point forecast. There is another way to formulate the diagonal score. It's directly in terms of crossing point forecast and crossing point observation, and it's what is illustrated in this figure here. So we can compute this score, and you have the equation. And this score is proper. If you do something else with 2y and 2f, if you do something more, if you use a naive score, if you just compute the absolute difference, then you end up with a score which is not proper. So if you want to play with these two quantities, which is like the projection of your observation in terms of quantile level and the crossing point forecast, you need to use this diagonal score. And the diagonal score is a score that we are using routinely now at ECMWF to monitor our performance of our forecast, of our ensemble forecast. And here it's about showing the diagonal skill score. So the higher the better. So we compare the skill of our ensemble forecast with respect to climatological forecast. And we see that over the years we have improved the performance of our ensemble for precipitation here. So what I'm trying to say here is that we are using this score now kind of routinely at ECMWF. And we see, I mean, looking at this score and comparing this score with other scores like the CRPS, we see kind of different signals. So it's complementary in a sense with other scores, but we do not look at the CRPF itself. I mean, we do not look at the crossing point forecast as a forecast. We just use the proper score associated with this type of forecast in our routine verification. So I'm in the process to try to convince my colleagues at the center that it would make sense to focus as well on this forecast, on the CFS, and to use it for extreme events. So maybe I forgot to say that, so this, at the same time, threshold and quantile CRPS, it's a way, if you like, to put more weight on the tails of the distribution, tail of the forecast distribution, but also at the same time of the climate distribution. So we really would like to emphasize the extreme in the forecast and in the climates. So certainly the forecast associated with this score might have some maybe interesting to look at it when we want to forecast extreme events. And we have already if you like, a product, a kind of an iconic product at ECMWF, which is called the EFI, the Extreme Forecast Index. It's been introduced by François Lelorette at the beginning of this century, and it's very much used to, I mean, when we look at extremes, and to try to understand whether the predictability of the event was captured in our ensemble forecast. So that's why what I would like to discuss here, how the crossing point forecast compare with this index, the EFI. But so I have first a slide. If you've never heard about the so extreme forecast index, this is an extract from the forecast ECMWF forecast user guide. And so so the extreme forecast index is a kind of integral of the difference between the climate, the climatology, and the forecast distribution. Okay? So you have the formula actually. So I have another, yeah. So I have another equation in my presentation. And well, so this EFI is very much driven by the ensemble mean and kind of modulated by the ensemble spread. So we will see how it compares with the CFI, with the CPF in this example here. So here we have a forecast of precipitation, the crossing point forecast on the left, the EFI on the right, and two forecast lead times, so how many days in advance we provide the forecast for a given event. So day 1, just before the event occurs, or day 6 at the bottom. So if you like, the truth, or what really happened is very much captured by the day 1 forecast, which is a good proxy for what, I mean, for the like the intensity of the precipitation event that has been observed on that day, so in July 2021. And what we noticed looking at these plots is that we have very much a good agreement, I would say, for day 1 between CPF and EFI. There is one noticeable exception, is south east of England, where there is a kind of a strong signal in the CPF, but no signal in the EFI, and we experienced that day also flash floods, so in the London area. If you look at day 6, we have very different signal in the crossing point forecast map and in the EFI map. The EFI, which is driven by the, driven by the ensemble mean and tend to be neutral when there is a lot of spread. We have a very weak signal, while for the CPF we have a strong, say, widespread and maybe noisy as well, noisy signal. So if we were talking about forecasters and not forecast, we might say that they have very different personalities now. And but what is interesting that their opinion converge as we come closer to the validity test. So it's what is illustrated by this correlation coefficient in the top figure. So how can we interpret this crossing point forecast? So this intersection point between unconditional and conditional CDFs. One way to put it is to say it's a probabilistic worst case scenario. Yes, does it make sense? No, if you want to build a bit on this, we can say that the CPF is the most extreme forecast event, such that the risk for this event is higher in the forecast than in the climatology. Right? I mean, might need to pause here, so you have time to think about the implication of this concept. But if you are a user, and if you have the possibility to take a preventive action with respect to some events, you will not, in a statistical sense, you will not be awarded if you take preventive action for any event greater than the CPF. It's kind of the limit for which you might take an action, and that's for any type of user, definitely of the cost-loss ratio. So I think what is interesting with this concept of crossing point forecast is that it conveys also an information about the potential event intensity, and that we can translate back, if you like, the crossing point forecast into a value in the parameter space, so with the unit associated with the parameter we are interested in. And it's a probabilistic forecast, so it has a meaning in the sense that we can look at the reliability of the CPF. So the concept of reliability itself holds in this context. which is not the case if we look at an index like the extreme forecast index. But looking at an index might be also an interesting thing. I mean, if you have user or public that is not familiar with probability theory, etc., it could be an asset to have an index and just say, okay, you look at this number, and the larger, the more likely to see an extreme event. It's a simple way to look at it. Actually, it's what we did to make a comparison between the EFI, so this extreme forecast index, and the CPF, this kind of new way of looking at the forecast, and we use the ROC framework. So we define an event, and then we look at the discrimination ability of the different forecasts, the ability to discriminate between event and non-event. The type of event we are looking at here is whether the observation for precipitation exceed the 95th percentile of the local climatology. And I don't want to enter into the details of how we have computed these scores, but we try to be consistent with the way we display the forecast. So we use the same decision threshold to populate the contingency table as the one we use to show a plot. And we see that there is, I mean, the results are encouraging, and more than that, I would say. We see, so in the middle panel, we see the skill score for these two types of products as a function of the forecasting time. And we see that looking at the crossing point forecast for longer time ranges, when the predictability of the event is low, allows to discriminate, to have some information to help the user discriminate between event and non-event. We can try to give a bit more of details about why, for which kind of user the CPF works well compared to the EFI. And so I put the potential economic value plot on left and right for day 1 and day 7 respectively. And we see that there are some users that might stick to using the EFI. I mean, in particular, if they want to be very confident before taking any action. So if they want a probability of 90% at day 7 to take action, they should stick to the EFI. For other users, it might be interesting to look at the crossing point forecast as well. Just this is almost my last slide, just to say that this concept is not restricted to any variable. We can look at other things than precipitation, like to meter temperature. And here we see very little differences between crossing point forecast and EFI at day 1 and day 7, and a good agreement even between forecast at day 1 and day 7, whatever the product we are looking at, because the predictability in that case is much higher than for precipitation. And it's only when we look at week 2 forecast then where we see differences and some kind of complementary information between these two types of products. So the take-home message is here. So it's this idea of crossing point forecast is like a new way to communicate about extreme event, a new indicator for extreme. Interestingly, it has a link with the way we do verification, and we look at proper score, and this special link with the diagonal score. And yeah, in terms of results, performance, I would say that the results are quite promising. And I will finish with a question for you. And so, like what I'm interested in is to compute this CPF in a routine and operational mode. So it would be really interesting to have a closed form of the CPF if we know the two distributions. So the climatology and the forecast CDF, if we know these two quantities, can we infer analytically, the CPF? If you have any ideas about this, I would be very happy to hear it. And with that, I thank you for your attention.
Yeah, just a remark on your last slide. In fact, it's not necessary that your forecast F must be an ensemble forecast. It can also be a deterministic forecast, and maybe first, this question would be, as a first step, easier to answer.
Question. Jochen, please.
I'm sure you thought about that, but you don't need to necessarily look at the point where the two cross, right? You can also say, well, I'm looking at a situation where the probability of the forecast is a certain percentage, right, of the forecast of the climatological probability. Like you say, well, it's not the same, but like 50%, as soon as you use 50% of that, or makes sense. So basically, what you can plot what forecast probability against the climatological probability rather than the variable. And then what you are doing here, your forecast is whether this crosses the layer, roughly speaking, right? Yeah, but you could also look at, so to speak, other quantiles, no?
Yeah, the idea here is to go beyond the notion of quantile, to play with these two quantities in a way that we have a risk in the climatology and we have a risk in the forecast, and we really want to know when. I mean, if you know that you have like 1% chance of having something extreme, you will take any action to prevent for this kind of event with this cost loss in mind that it happened 1% of the times. But if the forecast is telling you that for this event the risk is higher, then you will adapt. But you don't want to focus on one event. You want to really to scan all possible events and to see where the risk in the forecast is become lower than the risk in
the example you showed near the end with the precipitation forecast, I mean, is the implication that for the forecaster they would pick up the possibility of extreme event in a longer lead time forecast just because it shows up in the CPF and not in the EFI? I mean, that seems to be the case in that example you showed.
Yeah, it's yes. I mean, it's more or less how, I mean, it's designed really to do that. I mean, the EFI is designed to become neutral when there is a lot of spread in the ensemble. So when the predictability is low. But the CPF, yes, by design, I mean, we will have some signal, and this signal will be widespread, and then I mean, so we'll make the user aware that something is coming. The area basically will be not clear where it's going to happen, and then the signal will come down to, I mean, we'll focus on some location. So it's really a different way of how the signal is building up.
You'd be less likely to miss potential events.
So yeah, basically you have much more false alarm in a sense, but much less misses. Yes. Okay.
I was wondering when you compare the CPF and the EFI, how the intuition the further you have the improvement that you get. Is it because the EFI is meant to be brought
I think it's very much related to the way we present this product to the user. So we have we consider that if the EFI drops below 0.5, there is nothing to show to the user. And because it's like if you look at probabilities, if the probability of a given event becomes smaller than 10%, we will not show it because no one will take an action because of this 1% or 2%. And why the CPF is I mean, seamlessly we will have a high value of the CPF even at longer lead times. So and so it will still, I mean, if you like, these small probabilities will be put up front thanks to this mechanism of looking at the CPF. So we will have a signal while in the CPF while the signal will vanish.
If you were to say that is over down, like when you are looking at the power forecast, maybe we make sure that nothing is match.
Absolutely, yes, but yeah. The question is how you communicate that to a user. I mean, if you, I mean, the same for maybe you are not familiar with the EFI, but for probability, do we really want to show, I mean, very discrete probability to a user with the 1 or even 0.1 chance of some extreme? If the extreme climatology is even much smaller than that, do we want to show that? How to communicate that to a user?
Further questions? Okay, if not, let us thank our speaker again.
Yeah, so we now have the post of it, and I was wondering,
Are you able to bring this up?
2 minutes to get the PDF.
You need 2 minutes.
Yes.
Yeah, take your time.
so